It's important for us to know about strokes. It's important to know something about aphasia. The next thing to remember is a very important word, and that's plasticity. Most of us don't know this today, but we will know it in the future. When our kids or grandkids think about how our brain works, that we will all say, oh, photosynthesis, sure, that's how the leaves work, right? In a couple years, we will all know what plasticity actually means. And it's important because it's important to me as an aphasia person, and it's important to all of us, whether you had it yet or not, it's still plasticity. It is this capacity to adapt, to change in your brain based on what they talk about. This is the scientific thing, based on internal and external pressures. I'll just change that shorter definition. Our brains change based on experience. And it isn't just magic, it actually works. It actually is like photosynthesis, as it were. Am I pronouncing that one? Not so good. Yeah, okay. But I'll go even shorter. Our brains change, period. Now you think, now you looked at this before, these are the three, this is the beginning, that's the end, this is the middle. This made no sense, a little bit of sense, and I'll say perfect sense, right? So that's pretty interesting that this plasticity, which is this capacity to change, was learning by any other name. Clearly, I must have learned, right? I must have learned. Same guy, same head, nothing was happening, something had to have happened, and I had actually lost neurons, cells. They say about 2%. You get about 100 billion cells, you lose about 2%. They say, okay, so I lost 2 billion cells. You would say, oh, that's pretty bad. Interesting. But, and this just actually puts it up there so you can actually see those words rather than my handwriting, so you can actually see what they look like. Made absolutely no sense as you go forward in that 8-month period. But if you think about plasticity, basically, there are two things that are happening. One is this is the same neuron, that's the same cell, same one, that's the same body, but it continues to grow with these branches, dendrites at the end with synapses in one end or the other, and they continue to grow. If I lost, not if, everybody here who's had a stroke or TIA lost cells, lost this one, this one, this one. You have the cells you have left. For the most part, you don't grow new cells. I say for the most part because there are doctors here and others who would know, oh, there are some places in your brain where you actually will grow some additional cells, but not for this purpose. For the most part, we might as well think that those cells are the cells you got. You lost a few, they're gone. Now what happens if you lost them? How are you going to, quote, get better? You get better because you continue to grow the dendrites. You continue to grow the connections between one cell and another so that they can do nothing more nor less than continue to contribute to the ongoing message that eventually gets to wherever the motor sensors are going to work, right? That's the way it works. And it is not unlike at all photosynthesis, where you're converting light into energy. You're converting experience into energy and growth. And when it comes to the surface area, when you think about it, the thing that works most for photosynthesis, forget this about my pronunciation, is the surface area of all those leaves. Think about it, all those leaves. They start out here, most of the food comes from here, goes up, they get more leaves, they continue to create more growth, and they get more and more. The same thing happens here. The surface area for our brain isn't necessarily because you lost all those cells. Now you're developing these connections, these synapses, these dendrites, so that you build more surface area, doing what it does, converting into energy. And they talk about experience-dependent neuroplasticity. Again, lots and lots of words. But this is basically what it meant for me. Everybody, I would like to think everybody would go see speech-language pathology people. I'd like to say that. Some people don't do that, don't even get to see them. You need to see them, and there need to be more around the country for sure, because they really are the key to everything. It started with what I call SLP now, therapy. But after that, I continued with my diary, because you only get your therapist for twice a week for 30 to 45 minutes a week. what are you going to do with all the rest of that time? You have to do something. If experience is in fact the key, you need more experience so it gets better, then you need more experience. You need to do it. And what you get from the 2 sessions is the beginning. It's in no way is it the end. In many cases, it's the beginning, because then it opens that up for you. And in my case, did the language, the diary, voice recorders, which I didn't talk about, but I did that almost every day. Recording myself, talking to myself, play it back, listen to that, read from other things, record that, listen and say, oh, that doesn't make any sense at all, because when I read actually from a book, it was awful. I could speak much better spontaneously than I could from reading a book. That's interesting. Not that it made it interesting to me at the time, but a lot of this then became just the data that I had to mine later. And all these additional notes. Most of those books, especially in the beginning, I didn't get to read them as much as I bought them and read their title, read their table of contents, and began to read in that way, and then the pictures. So I always wondered what would happen if I had not done all of this work, all of these experiences, all of that growing in the last 8 months. What would have happened to me? And if I go in reverse like that, then you would say, oh, that's what you get. Thank goodness you get that. You need to do more with all that time. You get homework, but even the homework cannot be enough if you're lucky enough to just do the homework and do that every night for another 30 minutes. You need to work on this as if it were your life and as if it was 40 hours a week. So it starts with SLP therapy, and then I say it goes on, and you continue to develop any number of additional modalities, if you want to use that word, but basically other experiences that allow you to understand that with plasticity, with experience, comes the change and comes the learning that comes from doing any number of additional experiences of any possible kind. In my case, the intensive activities, the scientists say 20 hours a week or more. In my case, it was easy 40. It was just working, doing all these different things, using any number of different modalities, and really begin to really experiment with myself to understand what I thought I had heard, what I thought I had written. And again, I still didn't have the full awareness at that time, but it helped me mine that data. Repetition is very, very needed. There were some words that I walked past signs every day, and I would say them to myself so much. I know so much that the police would go by and other people would go by and say, "You need to keep an eye on that guy. He's just standing there looking at those signs, you know." And it's true. I would read them for a while, and I had my phone like this, so I'd read them for a while like this. I'd be doing this, and I go, "Oh, fuck." And I look around, and there's a cop, there was a police station right behind me, so I was always looking over there. Just like that. People would go by. Wait till they go by. Oh, not go back. So it's very interesting. Personal relevance, you have to know who you were before, and at least know the beginning of how you're going to find who you were before in terms of the way you've described metaphors to you in the past and how you've been thinking about the past and the future. So for me, there were lots and lots of things that helped with that. And then the interaction, because I did find that I had spoken, written, and wrote with the SLP therapist all the same day on the same subject, and then later, after I had all this data, pulled them together and went, oh, I was talking about the exact same thing with 3 other modalities, 3 different modalities that day, and then began to understand better how I understood how my brain approached that particular subject. And that's where this really comes from. I found that was incredibly useful, and really, to me, felt like everything was focused on the brain, who was interested in growing as a result of this. So that's how I all sort of put that together like a gamma knife. The 6 steps of aphasia recovery, and some of you have heard this before. Motivation. Motivation. You have to be motivated. You have to be thinking. However small that seed might be, at least you have that seed that allows you to grow from that. But motivation is the beginning of everything. If you don't have motivation, and in fact, many of the prognosis that I'm sure plenty of SLPs have written down for the prognosis is, well, given age, severity, yada, 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 motivation, and awareness of deficits, right? How well do you actually understand that you can or cannot do these certain things at this time? Motivation. Second step, practice. You know where this curve is going, because this is really the interesting thing about plasticity, and this is why it's interesting to all of us. It isn't so much that I'm a stroke person, although it's interesting to me, interesting that it's aphasia, very interesting to me, but the truth is our brain works the same way for somebody whose brain is, quote, damaged, as people who are not damaged, who just are, quote, thinking, experiencing, learning, doing. Sounds an awful lot like students, right? Sounds an awful lot like all of us in work, in life, in education, long, right, forever. We are always learning all the time. We sort of talk about that as a banner, but we haven't talked about the fact that our brain actually needs this kind of information because it needs it like food. It really does. It needs to experience whatever it might be. It doesn't matter that you say, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. Okay, you have to do something. You can't just, quote, sit. The scientist has told you, and that's why I put it up here in language words, is that if you get intensive therapy, you're going to get significantly more practice, growth, getting better. Number 3, number 4, number 5. Yeah. That's the beginning of it all anyway. You have to be motivated enough to do it, whatever the it might be. There has to be an it. It can't be a big it. Can't say, oh, I can't walk, so I'm never going to be running in a marathon. Okay, well, how about one other thing? What can the it be tomorrow that isn't what you thought you couldn't do before because now it's so big already, now it's even bigger? What else can you do tomorrow that will be better than what you were today? It doesn't matter. It's just you deciding what's tomorrow going to look like and moving forward on it. And you have to practice that. Aphasia gets better with therapy, gets substantially better with intensive therapy. In the United States, there are very few intensive clinics in the United States. Last time I heard, 20-some. I went to a conference recently where they would say, we need to have 200, and after that we need 2,000. Think about it, because you need these kinds of programs that will allow people with intensive therapy to do so much better with their language and their life going forward. And the last thing here is, of course, that plasticity, this thing called plasticity, eventually become like photosynthesis. Everybody knows what it is, even if it has nothing to do with anything except green and leaves. But plasticity will be the word in the next 50 years that everybody will understand, because it'll actually go back into education where people begin to realize that that is, in fact, the way it works. It isn't just magic. It isn't just other things you can sort of decide of. No. This is the way the brain works. It works with experience, and it drives experience into growth and into getting better. Just the same way that light from the sun drives through that operation into additional energy and growth.